Check it out one time.
Yeah, I'm in it. Nothing in my way, never slow down. I done made mistakes, but that's old now. Only better days I can show now. Now it's time. Yeah, I'm in it. Waiting on this day for a long time. They congratulate for the show now. Nothing in my way, only welcome to the winner circle.
Welcome to the Winner Circle. I'm your host, Dr. Yolanda Gamble. I'm so glad that you are with me. This show is going to be slightly different than what we've done before because generally we're in the studio, and this time we're not in the studio. We're doing via Zoom, and I have powerful guests here today I'm really excited about, and I know that you will be too. And I wanted to share that this show we're going to be talking about the coronavirus and how this pandemic is affecting our communities. And you're going to hear from this powerful person who is a mayor. I'm going to give you his full name, but just wait a minute because I want you to know what we're going to be talking about. We're going to also share, he's going to share his views on the systemic racial disparities as well. We're going to have a powerful discussion on that as well. I want to introduce my guest tonight, none other than Mayor Larry Wallace Jr. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. I truly appreciate it. Humbling too.
Yes, we're just so happy. And I want to also appreciate AFTV5 for hosting this. Matter of fact, they're in the background navigating this show. I'm not controlling any of that in the background. And so I want to appreciate AFTV5 for having us on. And I'm really happy to have this platform on Zoom because now we can have more frequent shows. At first we were in the studio and then the coronavirus hit us. And like every business in our nation has had to make adjustments. I'm sure, Mayor, you've had to make a lot of adjustments as well, right?
Exactly. The team has, you're so used to the municipality going in their day-to-day operations. So having to identify above and beyond, who you can miss here and there, but now what is your skeleton crew really supposed to look like, and have to make the harder decisions of health and safety over certain other priorities.
Exactly. There's a lot of balancing act, and not only that, balance our families. We're working at home, and we may have children that start crying or come and say, "Hey, I have to use the restroom."
Exactly.
Something, anything could happen, So, what we're going to do, we're just going to relax like I want all of my audience to do. It's just relax and listen in, and we're not going to worry about whether or not kids come in or whether or not there'll be background sounds, because also, sometimes the air conditioning come on and it sounds like something else is going, rumbling in the background. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to really focus on the show and the discussion, right? The discussion, and that's what we want to do. And so before I really get into talking with you and asking you questions, Mayor, let me just share with our audience a little bit about you. And there's so much.
You ain't got to do all that. You don't have to do all that.
I got to share a little bit, but there's so much, okay? And you're such a powerful and dynamic person, but I've got to share something here so that our audience can know who we are talking to, right? All right, he is the first African-American mayor at City of Manor, Texas, which is the 7th fastest growing and 20th best suburb to live. Isn't that wonderful? Here in America. And among the fastest growing cities in Texas. I love Texas. Do you?
Oh,
I do. Of course we love Texas. And then also, he's president of Wallace Brothers and Associates, which provides small business strategic planning. That's a whole nother conversation I would like to have later on. We'll have to have you back on the show for that one. Also, co-owner of The Transition, which mentors within the transition assistance space. And then also, he's co-author of The Transition, Preparing for Financial Combat, contracted with U.S. Army and Air Force Exchange Service. Last but not least, U.S. Army retired service disabled veteran. Wow. And I want to just say thank you for your service. Thank you for your service in the United States. And to be a disabled veteran, that would be a whole nother conversation. And I have to just say that I would have to say that is just monumental. That has to be a life-changing, oh my goodness, experience to even Army and from there and then coming out of it and to be where you are now serving in our country. And I'm really want to say I'm proud of you and that all the accomplishments that I've read that you've been able to do along with the service to the United States. Wow. Thank you so very much.
Appreciate it. I have big shoes to fill from Larry Wallace Sr. and other family members. So we're a big family of community service and transparency, honesty, and trying to impact change. So bigger shoes than me that I'm trying to fill.
Yeah, and you know what? You must have big feet then. No pun intended, but you know what I'm saying. That's really a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for your service. I want to just jump right on in because there's a lot we want to talk about tonight. I really want to hear from you. In the place of service, you have a great history of community and civil service. But one thing I want to highlight is you are the first African-American mayor in Manor, Texas. How did you come about that?
Honestly, when I got out of the military, moved back to Texas, born and raised, Corpus Christi, grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth. My father's been out here since 2002. He was with Central Health, and it really boiled down to, do I go back home where people may not really know my experiences and the things I've gone through, or do I go where I have contacts and resources to be able to have a greater platform to start from? Right? Because at the end of the day, it's about taking care of yourself and taking care of your family. You want to give them the best opportunity and advantage to be able to have that lifestyle and success. And so that's why I came here to the Austin area. My father actually lives here in Manor, lives in Presidential Glen. So right about 2 miles from me. And when we moved out here, it was more or less not understanding the civilian side of the world. Really understood the military because it's easy to be able to read the doctrines, the policies, and everything that's implemented and how you're supposed to make your base decisions. Didn't have a clue. And I specifically moved my family here, usually with for most families, that trust factor, that the head of the household is going to make the best decision for the family.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't working at the time, the wife is the breadwinner. Even though I have my retirement check and my disability check, she's moving here from a job she had in North Carolina, to a unknown. And the only way for me to have a better understanding of what our environment is, what our city is supposed to be and where it's going and all of that, right? To not just all of a sudden sit back and just let things just happen and woe is me, right? How do I kind of get somewhat involved? How do I potentially use some of my experience to help? Because I brought them here into this environment, into this situation. And so with that, basically put my name in the hat for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Most of my peers said that's the best way, the quickest way to understand how a city operates, the decisions, where it's planning to go, is the Planning and Zoning Commission. I did that for about 9 months. And then elections came up for city council. I basically asked and said, hey, do I have to resign from Planning and Zoning Commission to go for city council? And the answer was no. And the reason I wanted to do city council was because I felt I could do more, right? I felt I could do more than just reading the packets, information, and making a vote on whether a rezoning was going to occur. I wanted to be more engaged in the community because that's what I loved doing when I was in the military, no matter what echelon I was on. And so I put my name in a hat, and fortunately I won against a great individual named Gil Burrell.
Okay.
And from there, our seat opened up for mayor from Mayor Rita Jonesy. She's the first Hispanic female that's mayor for the city of Manor. And it was an
Wonderful.
open seat. And really it boiled down to, am I running for me? Because if I'm running for me, then I could have stayed on city council. I actually stepped down 8 months into my term to run for city council. And it was a piece of, I could sit back and stay safe, continue to do what I'm doing behind the scenes and be there for the full 2 years and get reelected. Or I can actually do what I'm saying I'm trying to do, enhance the city, be the best advocate, utilize my experience and services if they're wanted and desired by the city. So I decided to go ahead and run, and history was made. And, you know, I don't want to say in the sense of history is me. The history is it being the first African-American individual in this. The milestone is where the city has gone to do that. We've gone from it being a certain demographic population to having a cemetery that has segregated parts into it to having the first female Hispanic mayor to now the first African-American mayor. That speaks volumes in where we're going.
Yeah, and for so long, you know, I've come to Texas, been in Texas, and I have a nephew who lives in Manor now. He bought a home there. I mean, that's how fast it's growing. That young adults are buying homes in Manor, Texas. This is so amazing. But, you know, I remember going to Manor, and the first time I went to Manor was to eat, I think, Southside barbecue. Right? It was kind of known for its barbecue. You know, and everybody's like, go to Manor. It was like we have to travel so far to get there, you know, but it really wasn't far at all. It's just that it was considered kind of like a country place, you know, a lot of, you know, and everything, and down home folks and fields and plains. But now it has grown so much. It's amazing. I barely even know the city when you're going down the main strip. It's amazing. So I commend you for taking on such a great responsibility and to run that city and to do it so strongly. And I'm sure that you're certainly looking at your stories and listen to some of the speeches that you have given online. You're making a great difference in that town. So thank you, Mayor, for everything that you're doing in Manor. I'm really proud to say that I can go to Manor, visit my nephew, know that you're there, and that things are running very well. So let me ask you just a few more questions. And I also want to say to our guests that are coming in, there are several people that are coming in, just go ahead and mute your video and mute your mic, your speaker, however, whatever that is. I want you to be able to do that too. So please forgive me for a moment. I want to just kind of open up, this is Zoom, right? So there may be a chat, or maybe someone may want to say something or however, and I'll open up that chat for you if you want to at the end of our show, and I may be able to just answer some of your questions, or maybe the mayor can answer some of your questions at the end of the show, because we're having several people coming on now. I'm really excited about that. Welcome everyone to the Winner's Circle. This is where you win. And then we empower you with the knowledge you need to succeed. That's what we do in the Winner's Circle. So thank you again for joining me. Mayor, I want to jump in and talk about the COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic. How is the coronavirus affecting your city, and how are you dealing with it?
You know, it's definitely affecting every city differently, right? Mm-hmm. And I would probably have to say the way we're engaging with it, one, is the approach of transparency and information. The biggest thing of success and failure, and I've said this before, is communication. And a lot of the times you hear what's coming out at different echelons, but it's not ever focused for the area that you're in. And oftentimes it's saying to my community, hey, I get it. I get what is coming out nationally. I get what's coming out through the media across the nation. I get what's coming out from the governor and even from the county. What does all that actually mean applicable to us? Because if cases, and I've said this before when we have our mayors and county judge meetings and so forth, right? Well, if there's 100 and some odd cases in Travis County, but they're happening on the west side and nothing's happening on the east side, that's going to require a total different level of engagement than if they're happening on the east side in
Okay.
my hometown. So a lot of it has been transparency and communication of where we know cases are occurring, where certain things may be occurring in other cities that are not applicable to us because our environment, our culture, our level of operating may not be, and oftentimes is not similar to Pflugerville, Elgin, or Austin. It's a
Okay.
different dynamic. We are a big commuter city as well. And most of the people that are in the city are heavily in healthcare areas, right? So they're essential workers or they're entrepreneur individuals. So a lot of that then too is focused on trying to identify, working with the Manor Chamber and other entities, hey, who's really hurting? And how are we capturing that information and that data in ways we've never really had to capture before? The city is really being forced in a way through COVID to really look at structurally some of the things it already had in place and some of the things it knew it needed to put in place. And how do we get to what we needed yesterday, today, so it's ready for tomorrow? And we're trying to do that with minimal resources, allocations, and funding available to that because we don't have that economic development. We don't have the sales like some of the larger cities do. So a lot of it is really more focused in, all right, we're having money coming down from the CARES Act, but we don't have a health entity like Austin does. We don't have some of the other, so how are we going to be able to try to utilize those funds without having to turn around and hand it right back to the county and say, thank you for allocating this big portion of money, but we can't do anything with it? What services and programs do you have that we can tap into? So we're not just giving you back the money and then you're going to spread it across the other 22 cities and my city loses the leverage of the benefit of that big portion of money. So a lot of it's been more on a strategic level. Early on, we created probably, I think it was March 13th, really went with the military mentality of all of our resources that we receive are regional. Community care, Austin Public Health, Cap Metro, all our resources are regional. So just like a military installation, if we're deployed, I'm on a forward operating base and I get cut off from all my resources and services, how do I survive until those resources come back? And even though these regional entities are promising and saying that they're going to give us those resources, you always have to think worst case scenario. People are not going to want to come to work. Funding is going to start drying up.
Yeah.
People are naturally going to get sick or whatever it may be. What are the first things to go? Business-wise, it's always going to be the outlier locations because business, strategically, all the big centers for health are where? In Austin. So that means my senior citizens, my families that are on financial assistance or whatever it may be, all of a sudden what was promised and what was supposed to be available to them through natural business methods are no longer potentially available to them. So how do we institute and implement a support system that we are using and that we can rely on? And that's where we created the Manor COVID-19 disaster group and the responses to COVID-19 that the council approved, which really focused on how we're going to do food distribution, talking with Central Texas Food Bank and saying, hey, there's better buy-in if you're able to bring food to our location. And then our Walmart and other grocery stores or whatever, the food that they're sending to you can be sent directly here in the city. Plus all the other restaurants that their food may be getting ready to expire, they can donate to that location as well. Plus, you're going to then have all the free people, meaning free as in they're not working for whatever reason. That gives them something to do versus hop in their car and drive to another location at 30, 45 minutes out. So you can basically leverage the resources and the free bodies, the people that are trying to put their minds on something else right here to help out the community. And I think that's been one of the biggest successful things that we've done here in Manor that other cities and even other cities across the nation, as I've shared what we've been doing, have been replicating in some form or fashion. whether it's been incorporating a great recommendation from my council member, Dr. Christopher Harvey, of getting the religious organizations, informal leaders together and having them identify amongst themselves who is the better expert in certain areas of mental health, spiritual health, and needs. And how can they also serve as a alternative for identifying what physical needs are needed? Because someone may not want to say, I need food, or someone may not say, I need stuff for my kids, but they may tell the spiritual leader that's within the community. And so how do we really simplify that process? And then also kind of just really working with the school district and saying, hey, what is the plans and intentions? It looks like we're going to be doing homeschool. So we need to get into that homeschooling mentality and tie into those entities and organizations that are focused in homeschooling, so we can make sure the kids, when they come back to school in class teaching, that bridge or gap in learning is not that huge. It's smaller.
Wow. Well, it sounds like that this task force, I'm calling it a task force here, that you have, they have to, this is quite a task. They have a lot to do, to focus on. And it sounds like that you do have a strategic plan, because that, what you just said really leads into my next question. And I'm sure going into the office of mayor, you had a vision, you had certain plans for the city.
Right.
And how has this coronavirus affected your plans? Has it altered your plans any? I know that you've just given a dialogue of what your strategic plan is right now, as to how you're dealing with the virus, task force team as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it just delayed things a little bit for when is the right time. Coming into office, it was communication is number one. Two was looking at transportation, enhancing that. Three was economic development type of stuff. And so really, transportation stuff was still going. It was really now looking with TxDOT and RMA and all the other entities of saying, all right, with COVID going on, how does that delay your processes and what you're looking at and what you're focusing on? And to a certain degree, it did. But we're still having those conversations on a quarterly basis regarding our Highway 290. It's currently under a feasibility assessment. There's no delay in that. So it should still get done, hopefully by the beginning of the year. We're going to take that information, push it into Campo to get included into the 2040 plan so none of that is delayed. You know, as far as economic development stuff, it delayed when we were going to sit down and meet with the people that are part of that committee. And we just had our first meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it was more focused on, all right, now there's coming out a lot of different grants and a lot of different economic support processes. How do we make sure we capitalize on these and don't miss them? But then at the same time, if we do miss them, how do we start putting things in place so we don't miss them for the second wave, right? So really no true delay. The other committee we created was the Mayor's Community Collaborative. So I can be able to meet with all the key stakeholders within the community, especially as it continues to grow and gets more complex. How can we have a flattened system of them dialoguing with me and the team and us dialoguing with them, while at the same time, everybody's in the room hearing, so they know what's going on for situational awareness.
Yes.
That pretty much just got kicked sooner than later to make sure everybody knew what was going on with the COVID stuff and everything else. So no real true delays. Most of the stuff I was already kind of working on when I was a council member. Is just now more in the forefront than in the back.
Yeah, you have to just go ahead and bring everything up now in the front of the burners and not on the back burners, sounds like. And then too, I want to encourage our audience that, hey, you know, during this COVID-19 and all the other different unrest that we have in our country, stay focused. You work with what you have, right? And even though it may be a little bit at this time, but stay true to your vision, stay true to your goals and your plans, and use your writing, use whatever resources you have, whether it be social media, Zoom as we're using it, whatever you need to do to continue to execute your plan. That is very, very important. And I see that you're doing that, Mayor, and that your team of people that are all around you, they're in the county, very powerful people there, they too have come aboard, and they're all doing their tasks. They're doing their thing. They're working in their field. That's a wonderful thing. So those of you who are watching our program tonight, if you have a team of people, if you have people, maybe staff or however it may be, make sure that everyone is doing their thing. No one should be sitting on the sidelines looking on. And certainly, I'm sure that you may have a staff care. Sometimes the anxiety of COVID-19 and can affect us as we're working and doing our jobs and doing different things like that. And so we still have to look after our employees, right?
Exactly, definitely. You know,
and their health and well-being.
The key thing at the end of the day, and it's hard when you're at the pinnacle of the leadership triangle, right? And that's usually where the hard part of the experience comes into play, especially in a situation right now with COVID and the social reform and everything else that's going on, right? Is how do you balance supporting everybody and not over supporting one side or the other? And especially when naturally the environment, they're used to one thing. Either they're used to leadership throwing their workers, their team under the bus to take care of the larger population, or the community's used to the leadership always overprotecting their work people and basically throwing blame on the community. How do you really balance that so everybody feels confident? And I'll say this from a leadership aspect. At the end of the day, right, it's all about, I don't care if you like me or not, you respect the decisions that are being made. And that's usually where most leaders fail at, is they want someone to like them. And of course, I want people to like me too. But at the end of the day, your job is not to be liked. Your job is to be respected, right?
Yes. Yes, that is so true. That is so true. It's a balancing act. It's a balancing act, and it's every day.
Right.
It's one day at a time.
Exactly.
That too far out, and you just almost become nervous and anxiety can set in. But you know, just take your one day at a time. Work your plan. Just keep working your plan. And at the end of the day, it all works out. And that's what I tell myself. You know, I want to run a 33-year nonprofit organization, and it's international. And you know, what I'd say to myself, just take one day at a time. At the end of the day, it all will get done. Just keep going. Whatever you just keep going. Don't stop. You know, and sit on the sidelines and get discouraged. So that sounds really, really good. And thank you so much for sharing that. But I want to now cross on over, because we are dealing with two. I don't want to call it a pandemic as well. Epidemic, I don't know. But anyway, I don't know what I want to call it. But we're dealing with racial disparities in our country as well. And this has been a topic for many years. So it's nothing new on the table, you know. And so but we know with some of the current news reports that we've been getting, as well as experiences that many of us have had as people of color, that we need to deal with it. We don't need to throw it up under the carpet and act like it's not existing.
Right.
We have to deal with it. So I want to ask you some questions here too. Let's talk about the growing awareness of racial disparities. In reference to the recent police brutality on Black people and the murder of George Floyd, we all witnessed worldwide. We all know about it. As mayor, are you connected with as mayor, you are connected, I should say, with the chief of police and the county officials. What are you doing? What are you doing to ensure that this type of injustice doesn't happen in your city? And how are you holding people accountable? That's a loaded question.
It is to a certain degree. It is to a certain degree. I think more the end part of the question leads off into two different areas, right? One, what am I doing, or what have we done in the city? I'm not gonna say what I'm doing. What have we done in the city? I mean, I love our chief of police. I love our city manager, and I love our council. We are all on the same wavelength when it comes to equity, equality, and trying to take care of the community, right? You can only strive to hire the right people, that they go through the right programs and the right processes, right? Whether it's the military, whether it's a firefighter, whether it's even our own family members. Sooner or later, someone is going to go left and go right off the reservation that you put in place. And when that happens, you have to hold them accountable, and you have to look internally and hold yourself accountable and here's another kind of leadership piece of it. The first time is always your fault as a leader. Second time is their fault. And the reason I say this is because the first time you don't know what policies, what processes, what system may have had a gap.
I see.
Or information you didn't know how to rectify it. And once you rectify it and someone does the same thing the same way, you just fix the system, it ain't your fault. It's that individual's fault because they purposely tried to go against the system. And so at least here from the municipal side, it's really sitting down and saying, all right, chief, all right, city manager, what are the policies? How are you hiring? How are they getting trained within the police academy? What is the secondary training that's happening here? We do a great job, and they do a great job of having them out in the community with the kids, you know? So how are you going above and beyond getting those police officers tuned into the way the community operates, the way the community language and how it breathes and how it moves, right? But how is the training? Being very contemporary and also forward-leaning. This is one of the things that we always had an issue in the military is you're training me on something that happened in the last war, but I'm going into a war that's totally different now.
Oh, okay.
Right? So I'm having to rely overly on my personal experiences and my innate abilities and influence and have to hope I run into the right leader that can steer me and guide me. So how do we make sure if the hiring practices are old and do not meet current and future standards, they are revised? How do we make sure training within the police academy is real time and not just training for now, but potential things you see in the horizon, right? Because at the C-suite level, you're not supposed to be planning for the next 3 to 5 years. You're supposed to be planning for the next 20. So what things do you see coming to scale? Things you see, services and products that you can start steering your organization to thrive when the new competition comes out. In this sense, the new competition is the new thing attacking the city or your people that could become a crime or a violence or whatever, and you need your first responders and your first line of defense to be able to know how to engage with them based off of the expectations of now and the expectations that will be there in the new future, right? Yeah. Not easily done, but definitely hard questions that are the same whether you're doing a business entrepreneurially or not. So having those conversations and then creating a justice committee. This one is with me, the city manager, chief of police, and 2 council members. So we can have a conversation across all 3 echelons of leadership on trends and things that are going on. And then the chief is creating a citizens advisory board to also help out with this communication, because you know there's always an incident is going to happen no matter what you put in place. An incident will always happen because you always can't plan for every contingency, right? But when that does happen, or when you're getting 75% of everybody telling you things are warm and fuzzy, right? You always got to be able to try to find ways to get to that other 25% that do not want to tell you what is going on or what some of the other things are, because it's easier to be able to highlight them and what you see sometimes make them feel concerned to voice themselves because they feel there's going to be retribution versus systems in place so that there can be change made. And a lot of times now, even when it comes to voting, I know that's another thing to talk about, right? you can get over focused on every time we do this, it always fails. But the one day you don't do it, then you can't complain that nothing changed.
Yes.
And so here is kind of, you got to keep beating against the wall, and hopefully one day you have the right people in place that can tell you how to beat the wall properly.
Yes, yes. And when I'm listening to you here, Mayor, that there's a lot of upgrades. There's a lot of upgrade in training, as you had mentioned, training, upgrades in policy and procedures, how we're going about things, looking back and seeing how old is this material? What are we using here? And to really bring it more forward and bring it more up to date, and all of those things is a need. And certainly it sounds like that you have, along with the chief of police and those who are city officials there, you're visiting these issues. Now, one thing that stood out that you did say, you have a citizen advisory board. So this consists of people that's coming out of your community, right?
Yeah, that's something that she wants to put together. Yep.
They have no official position or anything. How do you choose them?
This
is a sideboard conversation. It just stood out. I said, I've got to ask this question.
Other cities have this. We just signed on to the African American Mayor's Peace Act, and in there is stuff like this. How do we create these systems to be able to open the dialogue, to flatten the lines of communication, to what are newer ways to receive that information, right? And yeah, there's going to be some committees, some boards that citizens can't be on, because there are some things when it comes to certain processes, certain things that are written that are for the worst case scenarios that you do not want general population to know. Like you see in movies all the time, right? If they know how the SWAT team comes in and does how they're going to do, then they can plan for those contingencies, right? So there's some things that no matter how much you want transparency, there are some things you just can't divulge. But then there are other ways that you can create other systems to be able to get the information that you hope to gain, so you can make changes to those processes that can be divulged and those processes that can't be divulged.
All right. Wow. Thank you for answering that question. I want to ask you, there's just a plethora of questions I love to ask you, Mayor, and because just pick your brain on some things, and I'm hoping that our audience is really enjoying this broadcast. I want to say welcome again to everyone who's coming in, and some of you are just coming in. Thank you so much. I'm talking to Mayor Larry Wallace Jr., PhD, yes, Dr. Wallace, and he certainly is giving us quite a bit of information on not just his community, but focusing more on Manor, certainly, but also to broaden a little bit further out into the regions, into the Austin area as well, looking at the county and how we're looking at that, as well as the city. And thank you so much, Mayor, for being as broad as you are, and even looking at our nation at large. So I want to also ask you this question too. Much of the focus is on mobilization. And of course, we know mobilization is kind of getting things going, moving it forward, and bold actions necessary to further the fight of social justice and equal opportunity. And I want to highlight that equal opportunity throughout the nation. How are you addressing these issues?
Now that's the loaded question.
Yeah, if someone moved into your city, will it be equal opportunity there? What kind of opportunities would they have if they moved to Manor?
Well, because we don't have the businesses and so forth like a Pflugerville and a Round Rock and a Cedar Park, it becomes very, very complicated for options of employment that way. We still have a small municipality too. We only really have like one, maybe two positions that we're hiring for. So the hiring inside of Manor, it makes it very difficult in that regards. Now, when you start talking about more as far as the system itself, right? There's a lot of things you have to look at. And one of them, and you're going to probably not like some of what I'm going to say, but it's the reality. In looking and saying, you have the you know, the acts of 1969 and desegregation didn't really happen until the 1970s. Didn't really happen, you know, 1960s didn't really happen until the South, until 1970s. I was born in 1980, right? So my parents grew up in all that stuff. My grandparents grew up. And so you still have, you know, you can go to Taco Bell, you can go to Walmart, you can go to, you know, regular jobs nowadays, even mid-level jobs, and demand equality, right?
Yeah.
And it's understood. But even at the C-suite level, even for me as mayor, when I go on to the county and the mayors and county judge call, you know, there's only really two minorities, myself and Mayor Gonzalez. You have at the county level, you have now County Judge Bisco and Commissioner Civilian. But, you know, when I'm talking with my dad, Larry Senior over at Central Health, he was the only African-American executive, the number two. Now he's out, he's gone.
Yeah.
So you don't even have anybody. So it's one of those things of honestly, the higher you go, you see less equality. The higher you go, you see the more conforming to get through the glass ceiling. And most people say you shouldn't have to conform, but I'll say this too. If you're trying to get into a Greek fraternity, if you're trying to get into Freemasonry, if you're trying to get onto a sports team, if you're trying to get into a job, you got to conform.
Always
to
conform.
expectation, right? Yeah. But it's about once you conform and you get in and you prove yourself, you get the credentials, you get whatever it is, that's when you can make the change because now you're on the inside, right?
Right.
And we say we have to work. When I talk with Councilman Rudy Mateer, Councilwoman Natasha Harper, Representative Cheryl Cole, Commissioner Trevelyan, Jamar Brown from the Black Austin Democrats, and everybody else, when we're talking from a two-sided coin here. To make change really happen, you need the 10,000 people that want the change, that can demand the change, that hold us electeds accountable. But you also need us electeds that are really going to be transparent and honest and tell you what you're asking for is not going to lead to change because they can give you something that's just face value and is nowhere near what they really could do because you didn't ask specifically for this or for that. You got a resolution when you should have got an ordinance.
Yeah.
You got an ordinance when you should have got a charter change. You got a watered down legislative piece when you should have asked for this other thing, right? You're asking for defunding and disbanding when you should be asking for Lean Six Sigma application and waste management, right? So it's the people on the inside, the ones you know that are going to be there to help you. You got to sit down at the table with them and figure out what do the 10,000 need to be demanding that can be done. Because if you ask for the wrong thing, you'll get something. It may not be what you really could have got. And also, you have to be very cautious in how you demand and how you ask, because we've only 50 years. You had President Obama in 2008, but we're still talking about 50 years. That racism, that systematic inequality, what happened with the Papa John's founder, what happened with the NBA team, what happened, you know, all that is that nature at that level. You have to know that's what you're going through because that's how they were raised. You have to change the way they believe things, right? Because if you try to tell me what my mama taught me, what my dad taught me, what my family taught me, maybe even what the church taught me and all that stuff is wrong, and you're trying to tell me I'm wrong, I'm gonna go into a defensive nature. Versus if you try to change my heart and mind about things, then I'm gonna come and join you to make that change versus whatever change is mandated to me, I'm gonna have to do it.
Wow, that is loaded, isn't it? That is loaded, and no doubt it's very important that we understand culture and cultural differences, the different experiences that we've all had, and then try to, I like to say, cross the room and talk to one another. Someone that is not your same color, someone that is not from your same culture, someone that is, you know, and have conversations. Just have conversations with one another. It's very important that we do that. I'm seeing with the large protests and things like that, that many of them are coming together. Many nations and cultures of people are coming together for the cause to make sure that this injustice that we've dealt with for far too many years, 401 years, to finally come to rest to where there can be equality. And I don't know if and these are just my thoughts. I don't even know if equality is completely possible, but I know that we can just do it. We can accomplish it in some areas, because I think that we as a people see one another different no matter what, because we are different. We are different. And but the thing is learning to respect one another, respect one another's differences, and get rid of that horrible thing of hate, the hatred, hating someone because they don't look like, or they don't act like, or they don't have the same equal pay or whatever, and all these wars that goes on in the hearts of man, that many of us cannot control that, but then we try to help that. And you kept saying change. It was like ringing in a bell, like a bell in my ear. Change.
But I think
and it is time for change. I embrace change, don't you, Mayor? When change come, I'm like, okay, now we're doing things differently. We're having to do our show differently using Zoom. Hey, bring it on. You know why? Because we're learning, growing, evolving into this beautiful people, the beautiful people that God created us to be. And then we're discovering more about ourselves, right?
Yeah. And I think some things you hit on there is, one, we all have our own cultural pride.
Yeah.
It's just natural. And we all would love to see someone marry our same culture and pride and all that stuff. And if they don't, naturally, most people are generally like, okay, well, they got to be better than whatever, right? And that's just the natural way. But that should not carry over into equity and professionalism and treating everybody as you would want to be treated. And that kind of goes into a thing of, if someone comes into your house and tries to tell you to move your stuff around, what's the first thing you're going to say? This ain't your house.
Yeah, it's not your house.
And so it's almost the same way in a different degree here. And let me put it and rephrase it in a different way. You can't ask city to do things that are the county's responsibility. And you can't ask city to do things that are the president's responsibility, right? Having a better understanding that police forces belong to the city. Police academies belong to the county, right? And there are certain things you need to mandate, because then you'll get the change. It's the same way as you shouldn't go demand from my kids something that the parents are supposed to do ultimately. And it's really, like I said, that double-sided coin of sitting down, understanding the real environment you're in. And the environment you're in is based off of not just the injustices, but who was cultured, taught, whatever, that are still alive right now, and where their beliefs, whether justified or not, where they stem from, and how do you get that to change? Because sometimes beating it with a nail and a hammer is not going to cause it to change.
Yes.
And so how do you understand all those different dynamics? And a lot of changes happen through demanding, and a lot of changes happen through the community and all the different races coming together. But there's a lot more things that can occur once we really stop sitting down and stop having dialogues and conversations over and over again, but we really get strategic in utilizing all the different nodes, all the different industries, all the different formal and informal leaders, and saying, media, we need you to have this message and focus on these key things. Sports, we need you to have this focus and key on these things. Political, focus on these things. Nonprofit activists, focusing on these things. We don't have that pyramid like we did back in the day. We don't have that anymore. We have so many different organizations and so many different formal and informal leaders that everybody's trying to lead, right? Versus coming together and figuring out who has what role and what responsibility in leading jointly.
Oh, wow. You said that so eloquently, and just certainly Wow, you had me just froze for a minute. I'm just like stuck on what you're saying. I was just like zoned in, you know. I was like, yeah, this sounds so good. This is what we need. This is what we need. Thank you so much, Mayor. And certainly, I want to ask you as well. We want to move forward, Mayor. We want to move forward. We want to move forward progressively, and you know, in light of racial injustice. We want to move forward. We want to be, I'm a solutionist. My assistant calls me a possibilitarian. Mm-hmm. Because no matter how difficult the situation may be, I believe there is a solution to it. And as you were saying, sometimes we have to go into these different societies to see, you know, we got to go medical, we got to go over here to wherever it is. And we've got to identify what each person, roles that each entity, I should say, not person, but entity has, and begin to bring this unified conversation together. Wow, that needs to happen. I tell you what, I think I better get to my prayer altar and make sure I pray and ask. Yeah, I'm really telling you the truth about that. Now, do you feel conversations on topics of systemic racism is essential for provoking change in our governments, educational system, healthcare, prison system? How can all races be allies to these systemic issues? And again, going back, I'm going to say it, just repeat it again so I know it's loaded. Do you feel that having conversations on topics of systemic racism is essential? Number one, maybe I'll have you answer that question first.
Conversations only go so far.
Okay.
Right? You have to know the time and the place. And conversations can be just like accolades. If I tell you thank you, after a while, it means nothing. And then when I give you a handshake, after a while, it means nothing, right? You have to have an evolution. And I think a lot of the community right now is tired of having conversations.
Yeah.
Same way as in politics, they're tired of the rhetoric. They're tired of the fluff. They just want the straight answers, straight direct. If you ain't gonna give it to me, just tell me you ain't gonna give it to me, right? In the same way here, even in the veteran space, and I'm heavy in the veteran space too. You know, with our veterans leadership task force that we have, we focus and said we got to get away from the conversation. What resources, what people, what programs, what services are already approved, already funded, already allocated? Now, let's bring those entities to the table and be able to say, three of you are doing the same thing, but you do it better in this area, you do it better in that area, you do it better in that area. How can we come together and make the whole process better?
Yeah.
Was not ask for more money, was not ask for new money, because these things are already allocated. How can we make what's already there better, prove it, and then go ask for more money to scale it? And so it's almost the same way here when you're talking about social equity and reform and so forth, right? We're not necessarily asking for anything new. It was already promised in the Emancipation Proclamation.
Right.
It was already promised in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. It was already promised in, you know, the resolutions and acts of the 1969, you know, these things were already promised. It was promised in Juneteenth. It was already promised. We're not asking for anything new, so we need to change the language and the verbiage too. Why are you not providing these things that the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and all these other things that were implemented by congressional mandate are not happening and occurring?
Yeah, having those conversations within our governments and in our educational systems and those type of things. There are, like you said, it's already there and it's already written, and now holding, you know, our governments accountable to make sure that these things are being done, they're being dealt with, and they're executed. Yeah, I agree 100% with that. No doubt about it. Now on June 19th, and you did mention Juneteenth. Of course, we know June 19th, we celebrated Juneteenth, the emancipation of those who had been enslaved in the United States. And in your opinion, should it be commemorated as a national holiday? I mean, that's on the ticket right now. And there's, matter of fact, there's over 1 million people so far that have signed a petition. Hey, this needs to be a national holiday. If I can remember correctly, there's 49 states, maybe 48 to 49 states in the United States do celebrate Juneteenth, but it is not a national holiday. So
Exactly.
since there was the emancipation, should it be a national holiday? I know we have Martin Luther King. Okay, we got Martin Luther King Day, and we celebrate all the awesome things that Dr. Martin Luther King did for our liberalities and all of this. And I think it's wonderful. And sometimes people try to coin that holiday as the Black holiday. No, no.
Yeah.
It's the people holiday.
Right.
And it's about coming back to, as you said, you know, these laws that had already been set in place, going back there and revisiting and making sure that these things are fairly met, you know, going across the board for all people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I just wanted, what do you think? What do you think? Should it be commemorated as a national holiday?
Another loaded question, right?
I almost sold it to you, didn't I?
No. No, you're good. You're good. But, you know, for me, I don't just like to give an answer. You have to understand everything wrapping around that answer, right? Mm-hmm. And you can definitely say from a sense that one, and again, language, right? Yeah. Yes, Juneteenth happened for slavery and is the abolishing of slavery. And it was for African Americans at that time.
Right.
Slavery, the form, the aspect of it has changed. Mm-hmm. So just like any other movement, it starts with one particular population, right? Equality, whether it was the women's movement, whether it was the LGBTQ movement, right? The changes that happened for them also created changes for everybody else. Yeah. So Juneteenth is really the abolishment of slavery of all kinds. Mm-hmm. And what we're talking about right now is, even though we see the disproportionate deaths of African Americans and Hispanics are the second most disproportionate rate, right? Yeah. You know, but Caucasians have the most deaths in general, right? So it's focusing and making sure the message is right, because you don't want to give the other side the ability to say your data is wrong, because that takes away from our own justification of why certain things need to happen. You don't go into a business pitch with half of the information and demand money or demand fund or demand support. And we can't do the same thing here when we're demanding reform. Yeah, I get it. 50% of the people that are killed are Caucasian, but the disproportionate rate in those 2 to 3 times more that do not have a weapon in their hand are African Americans, followed by Hispanics. However, Juneteenth is the abolishment of slavery in general. Yeah, it was focused for African Americans, but now we're talking about a different type of slavery. Isn't just, when you're talking about judicial reform, we're not saying just protect the African Americans, let things still happen to the Hispanics and to the low income, to the underserved, underprivileged, and the poverty folks. No, we're saying there needs to be equitable support and assistance across the board for the less fortunate. And the less fortunate we're highlighting at this time, which is prevalent, especially in the news, in the movies, and everywhere else, happens to be the African American population.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you go to now and saying, all right, so should Juneteenth become a national holiday, right? Well, we have President's Day and all that. And we know they did not live to the ideas of what they wanted this country to be, just like we all never lived to the ideas of what our faith and spirituality may be, right? But again, should they have a holiday when they impacted change on a national level, just like MLK impacted a change on a national level?
Right.
We're talking about Juneteenth. Has that impacted? Did that statement, when that situation occurred, did that have an impact at a national level? The answer is yes.
Yes.
So when you say that we're not going to recognize this impact at a national level against slavery of all kinds and all forms, then what are you really saying when you have the Emancipation Proclamation, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment in the one singular day that highlights for everybody in the nation? You don't want to make that a national holiday. Now, I will tell you this too. We also need to ask the question, when we do make it a national holiday, what is the cost? Because we can't make blind asks. I will tell you, in the city of Manor, we are going to remake Juneteenth a city holiday. It used to be one. It no longer was. We're going to make it one again. But I will tell you this, it comes at a cost of $14,000. So there are ramifications to even doing the right thing. So the question has to be, when there's pushback of not doing something, is why do you not want to do it? What are the factors preventing you from making that decision? Because we as a community, when we know all the information transparently, we may decide, not with Juneteenth maybe, but with any other decisions, we may decide, you know what? Nah, it makes sense not to do that based on the subsequent aspects of it. And so, yeah, I agree that Juneteenth should be, based upon what its significance is at a national level, should be a national holiday. And I do know it's going to have a cost to it, because you're talking about all the employees are going to get that, they're going to be off the budget and all those expenses and whatnot, right? But if we need to do a swap, pick one of them other days that can come off the list.
I can name a holiday that can come off the list, but I'm not going to say it publicly.
Right.
But yeah, you know, I agree with you 100%. And thank you so much, because it is a national, something that affected our country nationally. And certainly many of our Black people, Africans, was brought to this country against their will. Many of them are now a lost nation. The people don't know their tribe that they were connected to. There was a lot of things that happened that need to be healed in history. I agree that it's going to be a cost, but I don't believe that it really should just be one day, June 19th. I believe that we should set an agenda between June 19th and the 4th of July, because the slaves, many of the slaves didn't even know they were free until 2 years afterwards. But it will get an agenda, set an agenda as to what we're looking at, maybe in reference to healthcare, education, just to name a few things, and you know, jobs for prisoners coming out of prison, different little agendas that we need to look at and begin to help ourselves, not so much looking at the nation to help us, but to help ourselves and bring our community of people of color, African Americans, Africans, and to come together and with our solutions, not our problems, not celebrating our, talking about our problems, but no, what can we do at the table to better our lives and future in the country that we live in? So I believe that we should make a contribution.
Yeah. My recommendation would be for Juneteenth is seeing where we've come from, where we're at, and where we still need to go to the actual promises of legislation in the Constitution. We don't really have anything that does that. Black History Day to week to month highlights all the things that were lost in history, right? But we don't have anything that gets us from continuously looking back and potentially frustrating us at where we are, right, versus looking how far we've gone and where we still need to go, and using Juneteenth maybe, as you kind of said, as a way of what is the next year, the ensuing year, what is going to be that one thing the whole community is going to be focusing on to impact a change to.
Exactly, and move us forward and keep moving forward. Very, very wonderful. Well, as we're coming to a close here, I do have a couple of more questions I do want to ask you, and certainly I want to say to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. And as you can see, the conversation is juicy, right? It's heavy, but it's very intelligent, and it's also very necessary, when it comes to dealing with our community and even knowing the surroundings. Here in Austin, of course, AFTV5 is right here in Austin, Texas, and has been for several years. Many of us don't know that it is a Black-owned African business, and it's very successive. There are many Black-owned businesses here in the Austin metropolitan area, which is inclusive of Manor, that have wonderful, successful businesses. And I want to just highlight that we should continue to support those businesses. I want to have many of those owners on this show, the Winner Circle, so that we can continue to highlight those businesses and how well that we are doing and moving forward progressively, successfully. I think that's very, very important. Merritt, thank you so much. And I just want to say diversity. I read something. I read something about you, you know, when I was kind of doing my study on Larry Wallace Jr. And you talked about diversity and inclusion, and I couldn't get that far into it, but we understand the meaning and the difference of racial ethnics, meaning diversity, meaning the race and racial, ethnic, social, economic, geographic, people with different opinions. We also understand backgrounds, degrees, and social experience. All this is different. All this is diversity. Religious beliefs, political beliefs, sexual orientation, heritage, and life experience. How do you define diversity, and how does it affect your workplace? Diversity, and maybe even your community, and ingraining it or injecting that into your community.
Yeah, you know, when I was at Houston University teaching organizational behavior and leadership dynamic stuff, that was probably two of the key things that were always expressed in those courses. And it's really speaking more to, you can have all these different cultures, experiences, genders, whatever it may be, right? You bring in different modes of thinking, different experiences, right? And again, it's, do you have an entrepreneurial mindset or not? An entrepreneurial mindset says that I don't want to miss any opportunity of having a higher hand of opportunity or success by bringing in someone that may think differently than everybody else, and that may be the key thing to success, right? That's diversity. That's diversity of saying, everybody, I need to hear from everybody, because everybody's going to have a different way of thinking.
Right.
Inclusion is basically saying, why does the Black person always have to be the diversity and inclusion officer? Why can't the Black person have a position in the C-suite somewhere else, or in senior management, senior leadership? Why almost every last 2 years of hiring for the new diversity and inclusion position within any organization has been what? African American. That is not inclusion.
That's not inclusion.
Right? And so there's a distinct difference of, I want diversity. Now I can say I met the quota, but that's not actual inclusion, because they're not really at the table. They're not in any other powerful, informative roles or responsibilities with everybody else. So diversity and inclusion, those, in my sense, and especially when you're talking about entrepreneurial mindset, those are the two definitions there.
Very good, very good, very good. I appreciate those thoughts on diversity and inclusion. You said some really high points there, and it's very important that we all think in terms of diversity, and then go beyond. I don't know. I think sometimes we may stereotype certain people to say, well, that they fit that position better, and let's just keep them right there. But no, that is not inclusion. We need to broaden our perspective of how we see and opportunities, and affording people those opportunities. And I enjoy just to see the diversity of people. And matter of fact, I enjoy it so much that I could sit in a park and just people watch. And just watch the beauty of God's creation in every person, right? And then to just think in terms of, to take all of that diversity and all, like you said, these different mind thoughts and, you know, creativity and all of that, and then just inject that into your business or your plan, or, you know, your nonprofit or whatever you have. And it grows. It actually grows your business, and it makes it more successful. So I want to encourage our audience to really think in terms of, don't be so narrow. Don't be just with the people that's a part of your security blanket. You know, oh, I feel good because they're just like me. But you're not growing. You're not growing that way. You need all of this diversity of thought and color. I don't even like this one color myself, but I think that's just wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as we come to a close here, I just want to say this. I noticed you have coined the phrase, the only way through is together. This statement can be applied much to what we talked about today, as well as the COVID-19 and then as well as the racial tensions in our country. What do you want us to understand when you say the only way through is together?
It's nothing more than a civilian term for the military phrase, one team, one fight.
Oh, okay.
Right? We do not, the only way that we do not get pieced apart, we do not fail in what we're trying to make change, is if we do it together. We're all on the same agenda. We all have the same understanding of definitions and what we're looking for and what we're fighting for. So that way we all get the same outcome that we want. As soon as we stray into different definitions and different understandings and different things that we're arguing for and fighting for, then we will start fighting amongst ourselves. And that is the quickest way. Galvanizing ourselves is the quickest way to failure. We have to stay focused on the actual agenda that is bringing us together, more so than a natural tendency to start fighting amongst ourselves. And that happens no matter where you're at, no matter whatever organization you're in. Sooner or later, the fight becomes so long that you start looking at the lack of progress being made and start blaming each other. Kind of like in military combat or whatever, right? You have to stay focused on the small little milestone wins versus the big win you're really looking for. So when you start having 2, 3, 4 small little wins, and whatever the easiest ones are to start picking off, so you can feel like you're building momentum. And then that way you can always look back when you start to feel doubtful on yourself and say, but look at what we've accomplished, let's keep going. I could put this in an educational perspective and say, most people just go for the 4-year degree. They get to year 3, beginning of year 4, and they're burnt out. And they take the break off and they probably never go back. But if you got the 2-year degree on your way to that 4-year degree, you look back and say, look, at least I got this 2-year degree. Only got 2 more years to go. And so it's how do you put those things in place so when you start to feel like you're getting tired, nobody else is with you, you can look back and say, but I do have something I can hang on the wall. I do have something I can put in my hat. I got a feather or whatever. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Let's keep going. Well, thank you so much, Mayor. I want to keep going. I would love to keep going with you, but it's time to come to a close. And I want to just say thank you so much for your time today. And certainly, I'm sure that many of our listeners have been inspired by you, and then some even educated by you as well. I want to say thank you for what you're doing in the city of Manor, and then to the Austin metropolitan area at large. We certainly appreciate you standing in your shoes. As you said, starting with your beginning of the dissertation, you have big shoes to follow, but you know what? You put your feet on in there and you're standing strong. And I want to just say to our audience, you can do it too. Stay in the winner's circle, stay strong. We got it, and we can do it together. Why? Because we're stronger together. And never forget, you have a voice, you have a position. And I know you get a little weary during this pandemic and then looking at the different unrest that are around in our world at large. But take a deep breath, reset, and stick to your plan. And I assure you, you will succeed. Thank you so much for joining us in the Winner's Circle. Have a wonderful evening. God bless you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I feel brand new, I'm seeing brighter days, I got a handle. Every day I'm winning, might just do a dance too. The vibe in me done arrive, so the dance smooth. The winner's circle, focus so the vision fertile. All my people with me, sky's the limit, don't be jumping hurdles. Everything is whole now, nothing in a semicircle. Hit me on that phone line, welcome to the winner's circle, peace. Yeah, I'm winning.